Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm gonna show you step by step how to sew these wide leg pants. These pants feature an elastic waistband, an optional drawstring, pockets, and there are two leg options, one slim leg and one wide leg. While the slim leg is also wide, in this video I'm wearing the slim option and the wide leg option is just a tad wider. As there are no difficult steps, I would say this is suitable for beginners too. And I'm sewing mainly with my normal sewing machine and I'm finishing the raw edges with my serger. If you don't have a serger, you can just use a big zigzag stitch instead. To make these pants, you will of course need fabric, and I would recommend any lightweight woven fabric with a nice drape like viscose, tencel, crepe, satin or linen viscose blends. You can also choose a pure linen fabric or double gauze, but the drape won't be as nice as if you choose a viscose fabric because there is a lot of fabric on the pants legs, but at the end of the day it's a question of your personal taste and what kind of look you want to achieve. Apart from the fabric, you will need elastic, which is 4 cm wide, and you will optionally need 2 eyelets if you want to add a drawstring. Instead of the eyelets, you can also install buttonholes, and then you will need some interfacing like H200 to reinforce the position of your eyelets or buttonholes. Here is an overview of all the pattern pieces that you will need. As you can see here, the upper pocket piece is already a part of the front piece. This saves you one sewing step, but at the same time the front piece is quite big and quite material consuming, so if you want you can cut the upper pocket piece extra to save some fabric, and I will show you now how to adjust the pattern and cut if you want to cut the upper pocket piece extra. And now I'm going to show you how to cut if you want to cut the upper pocket piece, which is part of the front piece extra. First, fold the upper pocket piece to your front piece right at the markings so that the side and the upper edges are laying flush, and then cut out your front piece while adding a 1 cm seam allowance right where you just folded at the sloping edge, and everywhere else you can cut without seam allowance because the seam allowance is already included. I'm not cutting 2 pieces, I will just cut 1 piece to show you how it should be done. So this is basically just a mock-up, and that's why I don't cut the full leg length. And then grab your lower pocket piece and cut it out all the way around without any additional seam allowance added. You will need 2 pieces, 1 mirrored pair. Now the last missing piece is the upper pocket piece, and therefore take your lower pocket pattern piece and fold right between the markings a little triangle away. This is basically the pocket opening, and then you will need 1 mirrored pair of this piece as well. And here at the sloping edge, the one that you just folded away, you will need to add an additional 1 cm seam allowance, and at the rest of the upper pocket piece there is already the seam allowance included. So to summarize, these are your pattern pieces if you have cut the upper pocket piece extra, and at all the red sloping edges you have added an additional 1 cm seam allowance. As always, transfer all the markings to your fabric with tailor's chalk or just make a little notch. The notch should be maximum ½ cm long so it doesn't exceed the seam allowance. Mark the center of your waistband right at the fold with 2 little notches. And also if you want to add eyelets or buttonholes, mark the position at the right fabric side of your waistband. I used to push pins through the ends of my marking, and then I connect both ends, and I will repeat this step at the opposite side too. Let's start with the pockets, and first I will show how to sew the extra cut upper pocket to your front piece. If you have cut them in one piece, just jump into the next chapter. First, take your upper pocket piece, it's the one with the sloping edge, and place it right side facing to your front piece so that the sloping edges are laying flush, and also the sides and the upper edge. Pin along the sloping edge, which is basically your pocket opening. Stitch with a regular straight stitch and a 1 cm seam allowance, and then press the seam allowances open and repeat this step with your other front piece. This is what your front piece should now look like. It should look the same as the original pattern piece, and now you can continue. And the next steps are the same for both pocket options. Fold the upper pocket to the wrong fabric side of your front piece, either right at the markings or right at the seam, so that the sides and the upper edge are laying flush, and pin along the sloping edge, which is the pocket opening. Now stitch along the pocket opening with a regular straight stitch and a little seam allowance of approximately ½ centimeter. Repeat this step at the other front piece too, and then press the pocket opening nice and flat. This is what your front pieces should now look like with the wrong fabric side facing up, and you can now check if you have a mirrored pair. Now take your lower pocket pieces and place them right sides facing to your upper pocket piece. The curves are laying flush, and now pin along the whole curved edge. We are pinning just 2 fabric layers, which are basically both pocket pieces, and we are not pinning at the front piece itself. If you turn your front piece around now, you can already guess how the pocket is coming together. Now stitch both pocket pieces together along the curve and a 1 cm seam allowance. I'm using my serger here. If you don't have a serger, just stitch with a regular straight stitch and finish your seam with a big zigzag stitch. The pocket is now still kind of loose, and now place it on your front piece so that the top and side edges are laying flush, and you will find a marking at the top of your front piece which meets the pocket, and there is also a marking at the lower pocket piece which meets the pocket opening. And now pin all 3 layers in place, which are basically both pocket pieces and the front piece. Align the side edges too. There is a marking at the lower pocket piece which will meet the pocket opening, and pin all 3 layers in place here too. This is what it should look like now, and next we're gonna secure the pocket within the seam allowance with few stitches. I'm stitching with a regular straight stitch and ½ centimeter of seam allowance, and last but not least, press the pocket nice and flat. And this is what the final pocket should look like. For the side and inseams, place 1 front piece on 1 back piece with right fabric sides facing, and pin along the side seams and also the inseam. As you can see here, the front piece is remarkably smaller than the back piece, which is normal. You just need to pull so that the edges are laying flush. This is what your pants leg should look like now, and now we're going to stitch the inseam and also the side seam with a regular straight stitch and the 1 centimeter seam allowance, and then finish the seam with your overlocker or with a big zigzag stitch. As always, repeat these steps with the other pants leg as well. This is what it should look like now, and now you should have one mirrored pair of pants legs. For the crotch seam, turn one of the pant legs right side out, while the other one remains with the wrong fabric side facing out. And then insert the one that you just turned right side out into the other one so that the right fabric sides are facing, and then pin both pieces together along the crotch seam. For a better orientation, start by pinning the two inseams together. You're basically pinning from the center back to the center front, and both front pieces are laying together and also both back pieces are laying together. This is what it should look like now. And now sew along the crotch with a regular straight stitch and a 1 cm seam allowance, and then finish the seam. This is what your crotch seam should look like now, and now turn your pants right side out. If you want to add a drawstring to your waistband, we need to install eyelets or a buttonhole, and to reinforce the position we now need to press a little piece of interfacing. I'm using H200 to the wrong fabric side of your waistband, right at the position of your buttonholes or eyelets, and then install the eyelets or sew on the buttonholes. I'm using my buttonhole presser foot. For the waistband, first finish the short sides with your overlocker or a big zigzag stitch, and then fold and pin the short edges together so that the right fabric sides are facing. And here are two markings, and right between those markings we're gonna leave a little gap for our elastic. So basically sew until the white pin, stop, and then continue sewing at the red pin. I'm stitching with a 1 cm seam allowance and a regular straight stitch, and as I mentioned before, I have left a little gap between both markings. And now press the seam allowances open. Now fold your waistband lengthwise so that wrong fabric sides are facing, and pin it together roughly. You are pinning all the way around. Your waistband is basically a circle, and pin both raw edges together. This is what it should look like now. And now take your pants and pin the waistband all the way around to the pants. Here are the buttonholes, and they should face the pants, and there is a marking right between the buttonholes, and this marking will meet the center front. If you don't have buttonholes or eyelets, make sure that the gap in the waistband is facing up. And then there is another marking at the waistband which will meet the side seam, and the seam of the waistband will meet the center back seam. And now just pin the waistband to your pants all the way around, aligning all raw edges, and basically you are pinning 3 layers of fabric together. And again, if you're having buttonholes or eyelets on your waistband, make sure that these are facing down so that they are facing the pants, and the gap in the waistband should be facing up. And once you've pinned the waistband all the way around, stitch with the regular straight stitch and 1 cm seam allowance, and then finish the seam. Now this is what it should look like now, and if you fold the waistband up, you can see that your eyelets or buttonholes are on the outside. And now take some elastic and a safety pin and insert the elastic through the gap in the waistband right into the waistband. To figure out the correct length of your elastic, wrap it around your waist and figure out which length is comfortable but still tight, and then add 1 cm seam allowance and cut it to size. Before you sew the ends of the elastic in place, you can try on the pants and see whether you like the length of your elastic and you still have the chance to shorten it. Now overlap the ends of the elastic by 1 centimeter and pin it in place. You can try the pants on now if you want to check if you like the length of the elastic. Make sure that the elastic is not twisted, and then stitch the ends in place with a zigzag stitch. There are 2 centimeters of hem allowance included in the pattern. You can now try on the pants to see whether you like the length, and if not, you can just cut off the excess length and then finish the hem all the way around. I'm using my overlocker, but you can also use a big zigzag stitch instead as always, and then fold your hem 2 centimeters to the wrong fabric side and pin it in place. And now stitch with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance all the way around using a regular straight stitch. If you want to add a drawstring, now take the drawstring piece and fold it lengthwise so that the right fabric sides are facing, and pin it together along the whole raw edge. This is what it should look like now, and right at the center of your drawstring there are 2 markings, and I will leave a turning gap right between those 2 markings. And now stitch with a straight stitch and a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Start at one of the short edges, and as here is a corner, leave your needle in the fabric as soon as you reach the corner, and then lift your presser foot, rotate your drawstring and continue sewing. And once you reach the marking, backstitch and stop sewing, and then continue sewing at the other marking. This is what it should look like. And to make it easier to turn the drawstring, I will cut back the seam allowances and the corners. I will cut back the seam allowance to approximately 3 millimeters, and I'm cutting everywhere where I've stitched, and I am not cutting away the seam allowances right at the turning gap, so here the seam allowances remain. Now turn your drawstring right side out through your opening gap. I'm using some kind of turning tool. It works pretty well for me, so I will link it in the video description. And then fold the seam allowances at the turning gap, each 1 centimeter to the wrong fabric side, and pin it all together so that the turning gap is fully closed. And then stitch along the turning gap close to the edge with a regular straight stitch. Next, attach a safety pin to one of the ends of your drawstring and insert it into the waistband through the buttonholes. And now, and this is the last step, spread the elastic in your waistband equally and also this drawstring so that the ends have the same length, and then pin the elastic to the waistband right at the center back. And now we're going to stitch in the ditch right at the waistband seam with a regular straight stitch to secure the drawstring but also the elastic. And now you're done. I hope you enjoy your new pants. If you have any questions or feedback, Feel free to reach out on Instagram or leave a comment.